From our highly secure, top secret, moderately soundproof location, we are back. That Jeff's guitar solo means that we are back to another episode of the Spurs Insider Podcast. We were talking yesterday before, this is being taped on Monday, before the Miami game. Jeff said we needed to get in to the secure location to do another podcast because the last podcast that was posted was talking about how the Spurs are good again. And as of yesterday before the Miami game, they were bad again. And then 2.5 hours later, now they're good again. So we really don't need to be here because everything we said last week is the same, correct?
All right. Thanks for coming out.
We have the Express News beat writer, Jeff McDonald. We have Express News sports editor, Nick Talbot. I am Mike Finger. We are talking about...
Ringo's quit the band, I think.
Ringo has quit the band. He is...
going solo.
He is on tour with his drums in... I can't do that as well as Jeff does.
Drums?
His drums in Phoenix today for the Martin Luther King Day game against the Suns.
You know how I know it's Martin Luther King Day? One of the reasons?
How's that?
My children are not at school.
That's correct. We have some right outside the moderately soundproof location today.
They better be very soundproof.
We have a couple of kids
and secure
who are in a conference room that they said reminded them of what?
The conference room in Elf.
Okay.
Which, I assume that means the little one's about to go running across the table to be the angry elf and kick the older one. So
well, we hope
to speed this up.
It's a good thing we're in a secure location, so we're not going to be involved in all that mayhem out there. We are going to talk about what continues to be the most confounding team in the NBA.
For sure.
No doubt.
For sure.
It's inexplicable. How do you lose twice to the Atlanta Hawks and then come back and beat the Miami Heat?
This whole stretch is beat the top four teams in the East, lose to the worst team in the East.
For a second time. If their record at the end of the year against like playoff teams in the East will probably be about the same as non-playoff teams.
Yes.
It's and there's no I guess in some ways it's predictable where all of this has to do with focus and has to do with a sense of, I hate the whole cliche of sense of urgency.
Like,
or whatever.
Is it? I don't know.
Well, what I'm saying is, like, I sort of saw them playing well against the Bucks on the second night coming.
I get
you
that,
can sort of see, like, they might play well against the Celtics on the road here, because of the situation that they're in. And if you look at it in retrospect, I didn't expect them to lose to the Hawks, but you can sort of see how if you try to get into the psyche of the team, they just came off a rough stretch. Now they get to exhale a little bit, and they just stink against the Hawks and let the Hawks beat them.
Like, if that's really how they're feeling, that's ridiculous.
It is.
Like, you just can't do that anymore. Like, it's bitten you so many times this year that you just can't do that anymore.
I'm not saying it's a conscious thing where we don't have to play hard against the worst teams in the East. I think it's just sort of natural, and they're not good enough to, like teams like the Clippers and the Lakers and the Celtics and on down the line of good teams probably feel that way all the time, where you're not going to have just pinpoint precision focus whenever you're hosting the Hawks one night. Those teams are good enough to not be focused and lose a little bit of edge and still beat the Hawks. The Spurs aren't.
Yeah, the Spurs looked good in one quarter, and they almost won because of that quarter, but it just...
Yes. To go back to where we started.
Stop doing that.
I agree. I think it's easier said than done. I just think what's weird about this team is they can be good enough to beat these top teams. I just think that they are not at the level of those teams where they can not be at their best and beat the ones.
And where it all sort of gets uninteresting, and it's just the NBA today. If they make 3-pointers and the other team does not, then they have a chance. And if they don't, then it gets really hard.
Right.
So and even in the course of games, they're down 11 because they're getting blitzed from the 3-point line. Oh, they've come back because they started making 3-pointers.
Right.
And it's sort of like, I know Pop does that for effect a little bit, the grumpy old man 3-pointers suck kind of thing. But I do understand that it is sort of, you're sort of watching the same game over and over, and so much of it is just up to chance and variance.
Yeah, there is a lot of variance in the court, and we were talking yesterday from our seats high above the AT&T Center floor about just and this is not breaking news either, but how long an NBA game is. And it happens over and over and over again. We were talking about the game against Atlanta on Friday night where they went from way behind to way up to losing again. And that basically happened it happens during the course of a lot of Spurs games.
Yeah.
Where like even the fans now are kind of accustomed to saying, "Oh, the Spurs are up 20-2. That this doesn't bode well." You kind of see it coming. Like this is too good of a start. It's going to fall apart. And I think that's been the case for a long time. But when 3-pointers are as prevalent as they are today, I think the swings are even more dramatic and more fluctuating during the course of a game because the runs can happen so fast. And the Atlanta game right? The Atlanta, I think that was the most points scored from 3-point range against the Spurs this year, which they seem to top that every other day.
Yeah,
but
wouldn't surprise me.
Wouldn't surprise you. And I mean, it's a guy like who'd they leave open at the end?
Ralph Mouth.
Ralph Mouth. Potsy. Potsy had the brown hair, right?
Yeah.
We're continuing our cutting edge references to grow this podcast to find a sponsor. But yeah, I mean, it's not like star players are beating them sometimes. It's just guys who are left open that are capable of making a 3-point shot in the NBA. And a lot of people are capable of doing that now.
I mean, to nitpick a little, the reason he was wide open is because everyone in the world was guarding Trae Young.
Yeah. As you probably should have been, because he can.
I mean, I just assumed that game was going to end with Trae Young taking a 40-foot jumper and making it. So.
Yeah. That's what everyone assumed. Yeah. I mean, he went from the beginning of the game when the Hawks took the lead. He was 7 of 9.
Mm-hmm.
Then he missed his next 5 in the third quarter, and the Hawks fell behind. And then in the last 3 minutes, he scored 12 points.
He's a special player. And what's crazy about that, this isn't Spurs insider stuff, but just that trade between we have one of the elf people just try to get in the secure location.
They can't do it. They can't.
Can they survive the entire 30 minutes of this podcast without
not.
setting the building on fire?
Probably not, sir.
Well.
And how secure is this location, by the way, that a 7-year-old just opened the door and...
We need better security.
We need better security and a sponsor. Maybe
Yes.
a new location.
It's probably like sometimes Martin Luther King Day falls or these holidays fall and like there's a practice day and I have to take them to practice, and that can get a little more dicey because they have no conception of like Greg Popovich is talking right now. You can't just walk in the middle of the scrum.
Maybe they could just go play with Popovich. Maybe have fun.
The little one did that once when she was about 3. Just kind of walked in the middle of like everybody talking while Pop was talking and.
Pop gave one of his best answers. She asked one of the most trenchant questions that Pop has ever been asked.
No, she got in the middle and realized quickly she wasn't supposed to be there. It was funny. Yeah, Pop just screamed at her. It was amazing. No, I'm kidding.
It was pretty.
He was actually very nice talking to her. Like, hey, who are you? Who do you belong to?
He was surprised that you had reproduced, I think.
Probably.
And somewhat horrified.
God, I hate you.
What we were just talking about was the 3-point thing, and just how I think Nick was saying, that Trae Young is just capable of going through these spurts. But I mean, you have guys like the just frustratingly named Duncan Robinson, who should absolutely be a Spur, and the most egregious draft oversight of the decade is the Spurs, like every other team, by the way, passing on Duncan Robinson in the draft. He started out making
4
of 4 from 3 in the Miami game yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's why Miami had a big lead, and then Duncan Robinson stops making 3-pointers, and Miami falls behind. It's just it seems like there's some kind of spurt like that in every NBA game now. And again, not to sound like old man Pop just railing at the sun or at the clouds, but that's just what the game is these days. And that's why it helps that a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge is shooting them.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like that's going to continue.
Yeah, he's taking them.
It wasn't a fluke.
No, it's been a month now?
Yeah.
Of 3-point shots from him.
I think during that month he leads the entire NBA in 3-point percentage among qualified, and he now qualifies.
So is the fact that LaMarcus Aldridge is your most accurate 3-point shooter, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well,
I guess what I'm getting at, never mind. I don't want to set you off on a rant.
No, and what the point is...
Shouldn't your shooting guard be making more 3-pointers?
Yes, and a legitimate problem that the Spurs have that's absolutely valid, and a lot of people have pointed it out, is when your starting shooting guard is not a great defender, and when he's not making three-pointers, which is what he's supposed to do, then it's a problem. And again, this is something that we discussed high above the floor
when
yesterday.
We were up there in the nosebleeds.
When we were in the nosebleeds yesterday, is much like when your computer or your cable box or what have you, anything electronic,
lost me.
computerized, when it starts stalling and when it doesn't work anymore, what do? You like unplug it. The IT geniuses that we are, or you force it to quit, and then you try plugging it in again later. And I think that's kind of what they have to do with Bryn Forbes.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was going to say that. Like he just for his own benefit, I think he needs a break.
Yeah.
Is Bryn Forbes the new scapegoat for the podcast?
For sure.
Has he replaced Marco Bellinelli?
I don't know about the podcast, but definitely on
down.
Twitter.
Like I don't even want to get into who's scapegoating who. I think it's just fair to say, without saying that Bryn Forbes is terrible and he needs to be cut and never played again, that he's not helping the team right now with the way he's playing, and it wouldn't hurt to just give him a bit of a break and hope that he can help you later. Because as I've pointed out, this team, when Bryn Forbes is at his best, the Spurs usually are close to their best. And what we spent the first 10 minutes of this podcast talking about is how the NBA changed and how you need guys, not even like all-star level guys, but Duncan Robinson and Ralph Malph from Atlanta to hit three-pointers. Like Bryn Forbes can be that guy. Neither of those guys are stalwart defenders, but you just need a guy to hit those shots, and he's not hitting them now. And he looks like he's kind of lost in his own head. And so in the Miami game, if you look at it, I think he played the 9th most minutes on the team.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And let's not get into who should start or who's not, because there's sure.
I mean, we can do that in a minute, because that's the reason he keeps starting, is because there's no good fix.
Right. So do you want to get into that?
Yeah, we can do it. But starting with, I agree with you that just for his own benefit.
Yeah.
Just to stop getting his butt kicked every day. And just this mental butt whip.
Beat down.
Maybe a couple games off,
like
away from the starting lineup, might do him some good.
Whenever fans notice, or media members notice, or coaches notice that a player is struggling and going through a tough time, like the player already knows himself. They don't have to point out to him that he's stinking lately.
Yes.
Like Bryn Forbes was the first person who noticed
Yeah.
that Bryn Forbes has been missing a bunch of shots, and his shooting percentage is below what it was to start the year, way below what it was last year. Like he knows it. And as much as he said all the right things about how I just fight through it, what have you, like he probably needs a bit of a break, and not even like a full game off. But what Pop did yesterday is he played him once it became clear that he wasn't going to help. He kind of just gave him the rest of the game off, and it was fine.
They did bench DeJounte Murray for a while for kind of the same sort of reason, and it seemed to recalibrate some things. So If Bryn Forbes isn't going to start at shooting guard, let's go through the candidates.
Well, before we do that, I wanted to say one other thing that you pointed out, in that there are multiple ways to get a guy going, and when Bryn was really struggling, I think he missed a couple of shots in a row, and it looked like, okay, now they need to pull him. Pop gave him one more chance after timeout, and you pointed out they actually ran a play for him.
Pop does that a lot, actually.
The guy who was struggling, Pop ran a play for him coming out of a timeout, thinking, okay, this is the way we're gonna show so much confidence in this guy that this is just gonna break him out of it. And he missed it. They ran it perfectly. He had an open shot that he should have taken, and he missed it. I think that might have been the last play he played the entire game.
Maybe so.
Pop said, okay, we gave you your shot, now you're done. So he played. And before we get into the lineup experimentation, just want to point out that yesterday, like there's criticism of Bryn plays too many minutes, and why does Pop stick with him? Well, Pop made an adjustment yesterday. Bryn finished with 16 minutes, I think. That was the 9th most on the team. Like, you got to play 10 guys. That's kind of where he should be. Lonnie played more than he did yesterday. Lonnie didn't play great either, but Pop gave him some rope in terms of, I'm not going to pull you after every mistake. You can kind of learn to play in this game, and it was fine. Like, Lonnie wasn't the hero of the game, but they won the game, and all was great. But okay, lineup wise, ask your question.
So, who starts at shooting guard? Like, if you go through the candidates, everyone wants Lonnie Walker.
Right.
Why not Lonnie Walker?
Well, because just to parrot back your answer for your own question, in terms of his slashing ability, all the things that he does well, like I'm not sure that the best two players for him to be playing off of are DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. Like I think that you can, and even if Lonnie wants to be kind of selfish about this, he can showcase more of his abilities coming off the bench with the guys in that unit than he could playing with two more ball dominant guys like DeMar and LaMarcus. I just think he's. And again, we've said this in this room over and over again. We're big Lonnie Walker fans and believers in terms of him having a lot of potential in the future. But that would be – I just think you kind of take a little bit away from all that he can give you if he's not his usage rate, to use the stats that the kids use now. Like it wouldn't be – it would be better off the bench. So yeah, he's not optimal there.
Okay, so another candidate. Why not start Derek White at the 2 next to DeJounte Murray?
Like – Of your list, this might be the most interesting one to me.
Really?
Yeah, I think we just haven't seen a lot of them play together,
Yeah.
still, right?
Yeah.
It seems this season, and it's something that everyone's wanted to see, but it does seem like the most logical thing that everyone thought was going to happen because it gives you the best defense.
Let's skip him for a second, go to the other, so I can show why Derek might be my guy. Who's your next one?
Like now you're down to do you throw Patty Mills in there?
Which you absolutely don't.
Nope.
Because he is perfect in his role.
Mm-hmm.
And he won them a game yesterday against the Heat.
What other candidates would you have? You want to throw Marco in there?
For the argument for
Friend of
Patty,
the podcast?
Obviously not.
For the argument for Patty, though, he is playing probably better than anyone else this season.
What Patty does is he provides the same thing that a well-performing Bryn Forbes does in terms of floor spacing, and he does the right things. I just think that he's so good in his role off the bench that you don't want to mess with that. But to me, I wouldn't hate that, the Patty thing, because that's kind of their closing lineup a lot of times.
Sometimes.
I just like the energy that he gives the second unit.
I don't like breaking something that's working to fix something else.
That's my issue. That's my issue. So that leaves you with Derek.
I guess I didn't talk about the Derek part. I think one of the things is they want to make sure one of those two guys, Derek or DeJounte Murray, is on the floor at all times. And when you start them together, it gets really complicated to be able to do that throughout the game.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's think this through.
Also, who is your backup point guard at that point?
Well, that's what I was about to say. Let's think this through. If your starting lineup is, are we leaving Pirtle in the starting lineup?
Well, he hadn't been starting. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but it had been Trey.
Trey Lyles. Trey Lyles.
So, I know you're not at every game, but
right. So the starting lineup in this scenario for this experiment is DeJounte Murray, Derek White, DeMar DeRozan, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Trey Lyles. That means your second unit, and let's say Rudy Gay isn't sick anymore. That means that in the front court is Jakob Poeltl, Rudy Gay, and then what do you have? Patty Mills and Bryn Forbes and Lonnie Walker as the other three spots. Let's leave Marco on the third team.
Yeah,
something like that.
That's kind of the argument against the Derek starting, is because you have, and Patty Mills can play point guard in that group. He's done it before.
He can. It's not his best spot, though.
Technically, Bryn's played it too.
But Patty Bryn backcourt is not optimal, especially on the defensive end. So this is
you get into where you would not really be playing two distinct five-man units. You would have to blend them.
You'd have to stagger the rotations there,
which I suppose can be done, but it gets complicated. It's not as easy as we'll just put Derek in the starting lineup.
Right.
I mean,
this is a long way of saying that things work much better if Bryn Forbes is playable.
Yes.
And if he's doing what he did when he's been at his best.
And this is why he's had such a long leash and been given such a long, so many starts, and even when he's not hitting shots and not doing the thing that you have him in the lineup for.
Way back in, August, September, October, the early preseason podcast in this room, when we were talking about the advantages that the Spurs had, like one thing that they could rely on this year, what we said over and over again, we talked about depth. And I've heard some people say, worrying too much about the second team. Like, that's not that big of a deal. Well, I think it's a bigger deal with the Spurs because this is where they were supposed to kind of have an advantage over other teams, is that second unit was going to be better than most teams' second unit. So that's why, like, they don't have this overwhelming starting group that's going to keep up with the starting fives that we all know about, the Lakers, the Clippers, even the Mavericks, teams like that. So you want to make you want to take advantage of those minutes when the backups are out there. And so if you're kind of just haphazardly throwing together a starting lineup that doesn't fit perfectly, like, that's probably not going to keep up with those great starting lineups. Like, why sacrifice the backups too?
Yeah.
And people aren't. I realize things get lost online and feelings get hurt and what have you. Like, the point of all the back and forth has kind of been joking, and I think people can kind of take some ribbing back and forth. We're not saying that everyone who suggests a lineup change is stupid or that is uninformed or what have you. Like, there's good reasons for all this stuff. With the frustration from our end, from my end at least, is this idea that Pop just hasn't thought of this.
Yeah. Do you honestly think they haven't probably talked about this in a room for hours?
And
on
hours.
Plane rides.
Yes.
And bus rides. I mean...
that's what gets frustrating. Like, you're not stupid for saying they should change their lineup, or that Lonnie Walker should play more, or that Bryn Forbes hasn't been playing. All that is obvious, and that doesn't make you uninformed or just out of place to say that they should consider this stuff. But when you say it like Pop's an idiot, he doesn't see it, or he hasn't thought about this, or that he doesn't realize that his rotations are screwed up.
Basketball malpractice is one of the phrases I had
basketball
on Twitter.
You know how many...
he's committing basketball malpractice.
You know how many analytics guys they employ, and all the guys that you see in suits and the guys that aren't even out there that go over this stuff, in rooms and with computers over and over again, and are feeding Pop and the whole staff reams of information. To think that they haven't considered this and that they don't have reasons for why they're choosing to play the guys they do, that's a bit off-putting. But I totally get it. If you're a fan of a team and you think the guy who's not playing is better than the guy who's playing, sure. Like, I understand that. I respect that. That's cool. I just think it can get a little silly sometimes because we have the same conversations over and over and over and over again, and it's just like every NBA game is a long NBA game. The NBA season is pretty long too. Yeah.
Just imagine if you tweeted as much as Jeff does, how often you'd have that same conversation.
I choose not to engage as much,
All right.
but that's fine.
Well,
Jeff sees it as entertainment.
Let me throw this out there.
Okay.
Like to address the Bryn Forbes issue.
Okay.
Every so often, the other big man spot next to LaMarcus is another thing that's sort of fluid.
Mm-hmm.
Every so often, Trey Lyles has starting. He's been starting for a while. Every so often, you come out in the second half, and it'll be Jakob Poeltl.
Mm-hmm.
They will have changed the lineup at halftime.
Mm-hmm.
Could you do that with Bryn?
Oh, just like have a different starter in the second.
Maybe he starts, but if you get to play the second half differently, if the game calls for it.
I think that's a legitimate suggestion.
Like,
give him a shot in the first half, and if he doesn't have it,
if nothing else, it just eats up some minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not an easy issue. Like, the best scenario is for Bryn Forbes to hit shots.
Yeah.
Like, that's the best scenario. But
I think I got some grief for the so-called rant in this room last week about Bryn Forbes, and it wasn't that,
like, when you ripped your shirt open while you were screaming, it was a little off-putting.
The point wasn't that Bryn Forbes is great and that he hasn't struggled this year. He clearly has, but there's this refusal to acknowledge that Bryn Forbes at his best helps the Spurs. Like, I don't get why people don't see that. And like, he's, like I said, he's been a great development win for them. Like, there's a reason why they work so hard to have him improve his game and to become a regular part of the rotation. And like, when he plays well, it's good for him. When he plays badly, it's not. Like, it's not rocket science.
Like part of the trick to the NBA for every team is to find a dude that can hit shots for $2 million.
Exactly.
Like that's almost the only way you can make salary cap math work sometimes.
To add to that, like the Spurs have been very good at knowing when not to give the $2 million guy $10 million.
Yeah.
Every time they develop one of these $2 million guys, they realize, oh, somebody else wants to pay them more now, and we're not going to do that because we can find another one. And so, like, if you're worried about Brent Forbes getting a huge raise and staying here forever, you probably don't need to worry about that.
Right.
Like, it's not like they're going to be happy to see him go, but this might be the last year of Brent Forbes with the Spurs, and I don't think that either fans or the front office or the coaching staff is going to be treating that like it's the end of the world. That can't keep him. Like, he's been great. He's been a win for him. But you move on. And I guess that's all to say there.
That's all you got to say about that, Forrest?
Yeah.
Well, if he doesn't play much better, he's not going to get much more money.
Never underestimate, what is it that Timmy Bontemps says? You can always find a dumb team in the NBA.
You have to do it in the voice.
There's plenty.
I can't.
Where's Haberstroh?
I can't do it. I can't do a Bontemps.
There's always the Kings.
On the note of guys who might be gone, had a kind of an interesting little conversation with DeMar after the game yesterday, and it sounds like I just really like the guy, and I don't think that makes me biased or unprofessional to say that. It's just enjoyable in this job to be around people who you can have an intelligent conversation with, and I'm not going to sit here and say I'm rooting. I want him to be great, whatever. Like that's
beside the point.
That's beside the point. I just like talking to the guy, and he's a thoughtful guy. I think he's one of the more self-aware players in the NBA. Like, he brought up the idea when I was talking to him about, and it's sensitive to bring up because you're basically saying, or I'm basically telling him, you're known as a guy who wasn't good enough to take Toronto to an NBA title. Like, it's no widely around the NBA, it's acknowledged that it was no coincidence that they won the title after you left. You're now the face of the Spurs, who have had 2 decades of overwhelming success, and now the Spurs, when you are playing well and you're kind of leading the team, the Spurs are a 9th seed. Like, I basically pitched to him, like, do you understand that that's what people think of you, and are you cool with that? And he was totally open about it, and he said absolutely. He said that's been hanging over me since the beginning of my career. I used to frustrate, and how could it not frustrate somebody like that? How could it not get to him? And he basically said that the way he's been playing lately, and Pop pointed this out before the game, is he's stopped thinking as much. He's just said screw it, and tried to enjoy what he had. And he speaks about the game in very appreciative tones. Like, he talks about how this game's been better to me than I could have imagined, and why would I complain about any of this stuff? He's not it bothers me when people think that he's complaining every time he talks about how much it hurt to get traded from Toronto.
Yeah.
Like, he's not saying this because he wants people to feel sorry for him. It's people ask him, how tough was it to get to be traded from or Toronto? And he says it was pretty tough.
Like we all want these people to be honest with us, and then they are, and we get mad.
Right.
Like, have a different feeling, please.
So anyway, the end of that conversation was about the opt-out, and like every other, this isn't stop the presses stuff either, because every player says they haven't thought about it, but it seemed to me that he was pretty sincere about the fact that if that decision was made today, that he would not know which way he was leaning, and I think that's probably true. Not because he doesn't have a preference one way or the other, but I think he needs to gauge what the market is.
Right.
And whether or not the Spurs, how committed the Spurs are to building with them. And I don't know the answer to that question, by the way.
I just exhaled into the mic.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
The Spurs are in a tough spot with that. Because I just don't think you can build around him long term.
I don't either, and
part of it is age too.
Right.
Like, he's over 30, and
Yep.
I don't know that you want to commit 5 years, 4 years.
Right. And that's why I prefaced this take with me talking about how much we like DeMar as a person and respect him. I just don't know that it's best for either party, and it might be. I'm not breaking news here. Like, don't aggregate this and say the Spurs Insider podcast says DeMar's not coming back. I just think that remains a distinct possibility that they just decide to part this summer.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but I just don't know that the Spurs can if I'm the Spurs, if I'm going to commit years to him.
It might have to do with numbers, you know. Yeah. If because of the free agent market, the class this summer, he's going to be one of the bigger names, if not the biggest name. And it just seems like, to go back to the Timmy Bontemps thing, there's always a team in the NBA willing to overpay.
You just never know.
Yeah.
You just never know what the market is going to be.
Yeah.
And who has the money and who will throw it at him, and whether there's a fit there. And
and then we always end up talking about off season here. We're in the middle of a stretch run before the trade deadline, February 6th. Just a few more games until then. It's probably going to be a quiet one for the Spurs.
I would assume. I don't like the guys, the ones that people like, the big names. I don't think you're looking at DeMar and LaMarcus going anywhere.
Right. No.
If anybody wants DeMar Carroll, he probably can be had
for probably a box of Totinos.
You might have to find him first.
Totinos. That has not worked out well.
No, I mean, yeah.
But he was not active yesterday, and
2 games in a row, Rudy's been out, and
Rudy Gay was out with illness.
Basically, if the emergency option would have been Keldon Johnson.
They've
basically chosen that.
Chimezie Metu and Drew Eubanks were already suited up yesterday.
We will play Keldon Johnson in front of you. Is basically the message there.
Yeah.
And that message is going to be really hard to trade him, so he might just be inactive the rest of this contract. I don't know.
And by the way, you can aggregate that. Like, DeMar Carroll's probably available.
Yeah.
I don't mind that.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you're looking at them talking buyout on that.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on really if DeMar wants the full contract and just to sit around, or if he'd rather go play somewhere.
Right.
It just hasn't worked out. I'm not exactly sure why. It just seems like they misevaluated.
Yeah.
Is the only thing I can come up with. Like, he's just not what they thought he was going to be.
Right. Well, I mean, that hasn't killed. It would.
Right.
It would be better if they got some stuff from him, but like,
he got a 3rd year out of Marcus Morris, though.
He did. Anyway, we are over 30 minutes, and because we're in this semi-soundproof room, we don't know what kind of.
You got nothing else to talk about?
Armageddon. What else do you want to talk about?
I don't know. Any other topics?
Are you worried about what is happening outside the walls there?
We can go on and on forever. You want to talk about the new Pearl Jam album?
This man does not want to deal with his kids right now.
Not really. I think if we're here long enough, someone else will adopt them, and
this is getting outrageous.
Take them to visit the Alamo.
I cannot
Have you listened to the new album?
Not yet.
I don't think it's out yet.
It's not out. I got the track list. What song are you most interested to hear based on the song
You
title?
just want to talk about anything that will keep you from going outside and seeing what has been burned down.
Yeah, because then I have to do.
We're at 33 minutes.
Then I have to apologize to people. It's a whole thing.
Well, you need to prepare yourself for that. We're at 33 minutes. That is long enough for this week's Spurs Insider podcast. We will check you out closer to the rodeo road trip. Until then, take care of each other and keep it real.